lamps out of them.
All right. People make lamps out of all kinds of ugly things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. The lamp with the leg was okay, though.
That was a beautiful lamp.
It's a major award.
It was fragile.
From Fragile. Here's that adapter I was talking about. So you can see that it is going to go on what kind of flange or what kind of crank? Paper crank, and you tighten this down, and it's got a funny torque. I think I talk about it in another class, but they actually give the torque and sorry, but it must be a 170-pound man on a pole that is, they give an exact thing. See, first of all, is there anybody here who's exactly 170 pounds? So, you have you're worth your weight in gold. I mean, this is the only guy here that could actually torque it properly. So, yeah, you know, go on, I don't know, Facebook or whatever marketplace, for rent. Prop torque guy, I have 170 pounds.
Looking for a man must be 170.
Easy enough.
So it's got that snap ring in there, right? So you don't take that snap ring out. So you tighten it down and it tightens it on the paper crank. And then when you want to take it off, you pop this and it'll be suddenly kind of loose. And then it starts getting tight again. Well, it's getting tight because now it's up against that ring. And as you do it, it'll back it off. So it's a puller. Put your fingers in and hold it that way. Because what's on the inside? Prussian blue. Okay. So we were talking, we were about to start talking about the accessory case yesterday.
Your projectors
I thought it was kind of quiet in here.
The snap ring's out of this one, right?
That's it.
Oh, it's in?
it's on the outer.
Oh, here it is.
All right, accessory case. Accessory case. All right. See it yet? Almost. Provides the mounting pad and drives for components. I think we kind of talked about that yesterday. Provides mounting pads. Mounting pads and drives for components or accessories, if you will. Oh, things like the magnetos, generator, fuel pump if you have one, governor, etc. What do the magnetos do? Provide spark. What's generator do? Electricity. Okay. Fuel pump.
Fuel pressure.
Fuel pressure. What's governor govern?
Regulates the
Prop. Okay. There we go. The accessory case, they're made from aluminum or magnesium. Not a lot of them are made out of magnesium these days. And that's a good thing. Magnesium is not my favorite material to have on an engine. It's very lightweight. It tends to corrode a little bit easier, and it's a little bit softer. As it gets ages, threads tend to pull out real easy. Usually contains the oil pump, especially on light combing. Contains the oil pump. Yeah, so all of the small Continentals, all of the light combings, that's where you're going to find your oil pump. Big bore Continentals, they actually run them external, not inside. And big bore Continentals don't have an accessory case. They're a one-piece unit. So let's talk about that oil pump. The oil pump is kind of like your bladder. No. Picking that up. All right. Because it's not. Because it'd be like the what? The body.
Heart.
Your heart. Yeah. So you can say that I oil pump you. C-O-N-S-T-A-N-T, constant. What was the joke?
You're writing Valentine's Day cards over there.
It is a constant displacement gear pump. G-E, gear pump. Let me grab one. There's one sitting right on my shelf. All right, this is an old, tiny Lycoming oil pump. They've changed quite a bit, but the way they work is pretty much the same. First thing you got to note is that the oil goes around the outside, not through the middle. There's no space in the middle. So you have one side is going to be the inlet, and it goes around the outside, and then so it actually comes this way, outside, and that way into the accessory case. What else do I want to put here? Got constant. Well, not to pick on Lycoming, but since it's in front of me, Lycoming had a lot of problems with this. It's had many problems. And it seems to me, not a scientific thing here, but you know, as the older you get and the more you watch things happen, they had a design that worked pretty damn good. Then somebody got involved who thought, we can make this better. And that created a problem. So then somebody else says, I know how to fix the problem. And they make it a little bit worse, or they create a new problem. And somebody else says, well, I can fix that. And they create a new problem. Then somebody else comes, I have this brilliant idea. And they present this idea and they go for it, and all the problems are solved. And if you look at it, it's the same thing they used to do. So piston pin plugs, yeah, I've seen that go through that. It's like, no, we're not going to use these anymore. We're going to use this type. Ah, that's a problem. So we're going to use this type. Ah, that's a problem. So we have new and introduce this new and improved. I'm like, well, that's what we used to use. So, yeah. So originally, if I get my history correct, not that it's all that, it had a D drive that worked pretty good. So what you have is right here, this part. So this is going to bolt to the accessory case, and as you're putting your engine together, it's going to go down on top of your case, and you have to make sure that this keyway here goes in between your the slots on your crank gear. If you have it offset, then the case doesn't sit down quite right, and what people have a tendency to do is use the bolts to try and torque it down. Nothing on this engine is torqued together. It's just the cases, but that's it. So make sure it's locked in there, and then it all goes together. So, and this, of course, drives. You have a driven gear, and that is this one here. So it used to have a D drive, which, if you looked at a shaft, it would have like a flat spot. And then the gear would have a flat spot and go over, and that gear would then drive on that. So that worked pretty good. Had little teeth on it. That worked pretty good. But then somebody decided, well, put that D drive with aluminum gear. What's the matter? Aluminum gear and steel. So I had an aluminum gear and a steel gear. Aluminum gear and steel gears. Worked good. Worked good. In fact, I believe there's still some engines out there, like the VO435, still use that combination. They never messed with it, and it just kept on working. And I said, well, let's improve that. So they went to a Woodruff key. Well, the key failed. What happens if your oil pump stops going around in circles? So this one has a Woodruff key, and you can see how bad it is. It's sloppy on the gear. You can see the gear, the keyway in the gear has been wallered out. You can see that part of the key has already kind of failed. It slid off to the side a little bit, or some displaced metal. And you can see just how sloppy it is in there. Yeah.
Is that just from wear?
Uh-huh.
Or?
Yep. And that's a steel gear running on an aluminum gear. So I had some problems. I don't think that was a big problem. But the key failed. And I never heard of really many gear failures. I don't know. But then they went to a sintered iron gear. Sintered iron. That's a different type of metal. Oh yeah, I actually wrote my note here to remind you. Sintered iron gear. Sintered iron. Sintered iron is like steel particle board. You know what particle board is? So sintered iron is well, cardboard's cardboard. It's might as well be. It's everything IKEA furniture is made of. I don't know that. Shouldn't say that. The Scandinavians seem like nice people. I wouldn't want to. So then they have a problem with that. Those gears just ate each other up. Then they decided, you know what would be a good idea? Let's go with a D drive with a nitrided gear, and a carburized gear. Carburized would just have more carbon in it, and that works great. So we just kind of started here and had trouble. We got down to here, and we're like, there we go. Although, they did have aluminum and steel, but certainly that worked out. So I'll pass this around. Oh yeah, and then this is a 2-piece oil pump body. They don't make these anymore. And this is the old-timey style. So you had potential for leak at this parting flange and a potential for leak for this parting flange. You could leak out of there, so that wasn't very good. And also, this particular style, like yours, you can see that the gear fits on a shaft. Well, the new ones, the gear and the shaft are one piece, and so you don't have this cotter pin in there. It actually spins around in there. So all the new ones are a single style body with gear. Well, that's what I can say about oil pump gears. I don't know what else I can say about oil pumps. If they work great. When they don't, they don't. And you can hear, there's been a lot of times I talk about, especially cotter pins that in your connecting rods, and I talk about, you get loose parts and they go through the oil pump. The oil pump, the bodies are still aluminum and steel, and so you don't want parts going through that. So I'm very, very careful about what and how I work on stuff inside of an engine. So Continental Lycoming, they've pretty much gotten rid of all of the cotter pins because the cotter pin tails would break off and get into gears, and that'd mess up the oil pump. There would be a big gouge in it. And then safety wire is another thing. So in safety wire inside of an aircraft engine, I never ever use tools. I do it 100% by hand. The only time a tool touches it is when I'm all done and I cut off the extra and I bend the pigtail with the pot. That's it. Everything else is 100% by hand. So no tooling marks whatsoever. I think that's all I can say about accessory cases. There's not much more to know about them. Yeah, propeller, reduction gears. All right, so some aircraft have a reduction gear. That is so that you can turn the engine much faster, the crankshaft faster, but we can't turn the propeller faster because prop will break the speed of sound. Then it becomes inefficient and harmonic balances and goes bad. So, what's that?
Got a little Rotax out there.
Yeah, I think all Rotaxes are gear reduction. So, good point. Speaking of Rotax, we don't really talk much about I'm not going to talk much about Rotax at all in this class just because it's already so full. But your second year, Larry will do more with light sport. But Rotax are a very funny thing about engines. It just goes to show you don't know what you don't know. For example, anybody work or fly with a Rotax? Yeah, how do you check the oil level on that?
Oh, you gotta burp it.
What the hell's that about? I mean, the one thing that I never have rule 2. Everything to me is rule number 1. Rule number 1 about airplanes is you never go up and spin the prop. But yeah, what do you do on a Rotax? First thing you do, go up there, take off the oil cap, and you spin the stupid propeller by hand, which you can really appreciate the compression. For what, 2-3 minutes?
Long time.
Yeah, until you hear it burp. And you're like, what the hell was it? And it's like, this thing okay? Now you're ready to check the oil, and heaven help you if you just added oil and didn't do that. So you got to do that, right? What else is weird about them? I was told you can never, ever, ever back the prop up even a little bit. Have you heard that? So all the mechanics I worked with on Rotax are like, don't ever move the prop backwards. It'll destroy the reduction gear. If that's all it takes to destroy the reduction gear, you're never going to get me in one of these things. So I don't know if there's truth to that one, but you certainly got to burp it to check it. So let's see. So we're talking about reduction gears. Right, so we got a reduction gear. There's really 2 types of reduction gears. So you can have what's just called the spur type reduction gears, as the FAA calls it, which is just one gear on another gear. So there's just 2 gears meshed, and that would be the spur gear. And then the other one is a planet and sun gear. And those are kind of trippy. And I've tried for a very long time to find a really good animation of that. Oh, I should probably finish we talked about that yesterday. There's the D drive. There's the one-piece body, and there's how the gears look now. See, the shaft is part of the gear. This one's the nitrided, this one's the carburized. How do I know that? That has a little N, that has a little C. It's also things you learn. When you do a logbook entry, now I'm going to go off on a rant, so just sorry about this. Also, when you changed over, there's a service instruction to drill a hole so that this gets lubricated. You just drill a hole in the case. It tells you how to do it. So, it's one of those things, boy, if you're working on, if you're several rants, if you were just putting an engine together and you're just using a parts book, which a lot of people do, you got to be very careful. And you looked up the parts, like, oh, look at that. This is the new part number here, and that's the new part number, and that's the new part number, and that's the new part number. We just put it together, and you're not aware of your service instructions and service bulletins. Remember, in the one that's being passed around, it's got a fixed shaft. One end of it's got a cotter pin, so when it goes into your case, that doesn't spin, right? Well, this now spins inside of the case, and it needs pressure oil. So they show you how to drill a hole and modify the case, so that the accessory case, so that this gets lubricated now. Things you got to know. All right, so I was going to go off on a rant about logbooks. Logbooks are a funny thing. Everybody kind of has their opinion. Some people have the opinion like, only write what you have to. Never write too much. That's how those lawyers are going to get you, those damn lawyers, right? And so I'm different about that. I go all the way almost to the other extreme. And I think I've showed you guys my logbooks. And they're like, holy crap, man.
A book?
Yeah, it's a book. And because to me, especially on my own airplane, it's like my history. So I can go back. It helps me. What did I do? How did I do it? And if you're not proud of your work and you're embarrassed of what you did to the point where you don't want to write it, then you just got to stop right there and go, what just happened? Why am I not, why am I doing that? And so, some people will go overboard. Like they might actually put, overhauled this engine, and then the logbook entry. If you look at, internet's not working well, the log entry in my book from the factory overhaul, it's like overhauled, factory overhauled engine, work order number such and such. It's like 4 or 5 sentences, but you can see field overhauls where guys will go into great detail, like, and installed oil pump gears, part number LW1810 assembly, and installed a crankshaft gear, part number, STD, this, that, procured from, and like, why would you put all that? And, before you kind of like make fun of them, you have to stop and know history. There was a period of time where airworthiness directives came out and said, if you have these particular gears with this part number, you don't have to take the whole back end of the case off, which, by the way, you've got to take the sump off, then the case off. And so some of these older guys have learned and been around, and so they overwrite stuff thinking someday this is going to save somebody a lot of heartache just having that part number right there. So, there's a method to their madness. Okay, reduction gear. What kind we got there? It's Continental, so it's just going to be a spur. And let me see, that looks like a big bore Continental based on that. So this is probably a Gitsu GTSI 0520. And when they use those in like Cessna 421s, cabin class aircraft. Although the baffle doesn't look like it. Baffle looks like it's off an 0300. So that'd be a GO 300. Actually, it looks more like a GO 300. So yeah, I'm wrong. GO 300. So that was geared, opposed, 300. So they also made an 0300, same cylinders. And this would have went in a Cessna 175. And they sound funny. When they're going overhead, you can just hear it. Man, they're just wrapped up. I forget what the red line is on there. I think I wrote it down somewhere. But they are spinning fast. And not so much here. So what happens if you take an 0300, how many cubic inches that? Versus a GO 300, how many cubic inches that? And so the 0300 is 150 horsepower, and the GO 300. Too bad I didn't write that down somewhere. I forget what the GO 300 is, but how do they get more horsepower out of it? Speed it up, right? That's part of the Planck formula. All right, then that's the other type, the ring and sun and planetary gear system. And depending on how you do it, you can hold one end. I have an animation. Yeah, but the interwebs are down, I think. I know. Oh, that's the bad one. So, yeah, the green gears can go around, or you can hold this, and then this, the ring gear, different ways. Once the internet's up, I can see if I can get it. So, what kind is this here?
Spur?
Yep, just spur gears, just one gear, two gears. I have built one or two GO 300s, and honestly, when I tell you guys like I've built one or two, I mean I really mean one or two. Yeah, that's so one or two or three GO 300s. And the thing I remember about it is there are indicator marks on these gears, and you wouldn't think there is. You think, well, what is the big deal? I mean, this gear is the same as that gear, and why is this timed? But these two gears are actually timed. And it has something to do with where the marks here end up, because you want these marks in a very specific position when the crankshaft is in a certain position, because of the way the vibration down here affects the vibration where the prop is. And I think it says right in the logbook or the overall manual that if you get a tooth off, that it'll vibrate itself to pieces. So they must be pretty serious about that. So, all right, send gears. Not going to work. All right, go over here. Tab, okay, propeller reduction gears. Well, obviously located in the nose. Located in the nose. Maybe a spur type, may be a spur gear type. Like the GO 300 had that. Or what else has it? GTSIO 520s. I think they made a GTSIO 550 as well. Or it could be Planet and Sun gear. Planet and Sun gear. You know what we need to do? Let's see, what time is it? At break time, we'll go across the street, because we got all of this. All right, why would these two items be of major concern to me? what type of reduction gear it has. Just from the get-go.
So it gives the right reduction.
Okay, yeah, so that's a pretty open-ended question, of course. But I'm saying somebody brings you an engine and says, hey, I would like you to overhaul this engine. By the way, it does have a reduction gear system.
Do we need to know which reduction that we have the right,
On the CFR 1443 Appendix A, they say like you only allowed to do spur gear, not the Planet and Sun, because that's considered like major or something like that.
So, all right, not bad for a guy who sprayed me in the face with oil today. He gets so red, though. You guys got to see him. He's all blushing in his glasses. It's okay. I still like you. He is absolutely right. FAR 43 Appendix A, and he even quoted it. Man, if I had some candy right here, I'd give you some. You deserve it. All right. Separation or disassembly. Separation or disassembly of a crankcase or crankshaft of a recip engine equipped with other than a spur-type propeller reduction gear is a major repair, not alteration, because you're not changing anything. So FAR 43 Appendix A. I don't want to write all that. I'll just put other than spur type. Other than spur type is a major repair. All right, so you as an A&P, can you perform major repairs?
Yes.
You can. Can you return it to service?
No.
No, you can't. Who can?
IA.
An IA. So if you overhauled an engine that had a spur type gear and you called an IA, other than the spur type, so you had the sun and planet gears, and you called an IA and said, hey, I just overhauled this engine, could you stop by and sign it off? Of course, they show up and they see this nice looking painted engine all put together. What do you think the answer is going to be?
No.
Yeah, I don't know what you do on the inside. So just remember that, Call the IA before and then let the IA decide how they want to sign it off. Let's talk about overspeed. Overspeed. This is out of Service Bulletin 369, now Quebec. I have all these pencil notes. Move this to here and say that.
639.
Oh. 3, 6, 9, Quebec. It says move B, C to here. What the hell am I talking about? Oh, I see why.
Kevin,
Yeah.
how would you want to sign it off?
I wouldn't want to.
Okay.
No, well, whenever somebody's doing, first of all, I don't want to. But if somebody asks me to help them out and say, hey, I need you to sign off a major alteration repair. If it's something like fabric work that's going to be where you're putting on fabric, I want to see what's under it before you put the fabric on. Then I want to see the fabric put on the glue stage, how you glued it and everything. So it's a pre-inspection, then a glue inspection, and then a finish inspection. So on something like that, I would want to see it all laid out, ready to go together, and then I could sign it off.
So wait, you would call the IA before you overhaul it fully?
Yes, I would be working with an IA before.
Okay, so they just kind of watch you do it.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, and they're involved. All right, we're talking about overspeeds here. Let me see. I said move B and C to here, which is B. What is B? B is momentary overspeed. Okay, so we'll put A, momentary overspeed. Momentary overspeed. So there are, I don't want to make this, yeah, good, I wrote that, a big deal. But I want you to be aware of, as a mechanic, that, if somebody brings in an aircraft to you, like my aircraft with a governor on it, and I've personally attest to the fact that instruments and aircraft will lie to you. They are way off. You know, I bought my airplane and I took off, and 5 minutes into it, and my passenger, my CFI was with me, goes, "You are overspeeding that engine." I'm like, "Oh crap," and so I had to pull back on it. Well, it's because my tack lies. It like goes way past red line when it's, and I got a handheld tack checker. Got home, first thing I did, check it. And I'm like, "Oh, it's not overspeeding. The tack just lies." Right? So, but if somebody came to you and you were working on an airplane, you did discover that, hey, your tack is way off. It's like when you are at red line and you go to red line, you're actually like 200 RPM past red line. Or, it could be an overboost, especially if they have turbocharger. It's like, wow, when you think you're right at the edge, you're way past the edge. So if you find that, you can't just correct those situations and go, well, situation corrected. Then you have to go in, you got to look, okay, now what happened? Well, you have a momentary overspeed or an overboost. So momentary overspeed is not more than 10% of rated power. Yeah, no more than 10% rated power. Rated power for less than, this is funny right here, power for less than, my notes were correct, were wrong one year, and I actually have minutes written down here, but it's 3 seconds. SECOND, 3 seconds. 1 year I wrote 10 minutes or 5 minutes or something. It was like, no, that sounds awful long. So no corrective action. For fixed wing. If I get into what they want for helicopters, we'll be writing all night. So I'll just tell you that no corrective action if it's a fixed wing. You just did it for 3 seconds, you're fine, overspeed. And quite honestly, anything with a constant speed prop, it's going to overspeed a little bit on takeoff. It's when the oil's cold. You just watch it. You can hear it. So I try and go real easy on that stuff. Let me see. Maybe, I don't know, overspeed exceeding 10%. Overspeed exceeding 10%. Let's talk about what is 10%. So I have a 230 horsepower engine. What's 10%?
23,
So I got to go another 23 horsepower out of that.
253.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. So you'd have to really get into something that had boost available. Otherwise, it's not going to work. 10% of rated, exceeding 10% of rated power. Rated power for more than 3 seconds. Let me see. Well, I didn't actually finish writing whatever this was. My notes got all jacked up. Momentary overspeed. Oh, I see. We'll come back around to that. I'm going to have to fill in some stuff, and then we'll fill that in, and then told you my notes are jacked up now. And then, let me see. Stick with me. Okay, I got it. Then it is 11, 12. Oh, this goes here. That's my problem. Okay. This is terrible. I should just start with what I had. Overspeed. Sorry. Let's try this. Overspeed. 1. Maybe it'll make sense in a minute where I was trying to go. What is an overspeed? Overspeed is when engine, I should have just wrote my original notes. Engine operates above rated speed. Rated speed. Which is RPM, right? There are 3 categories. God, this is making more sense already. 3 categories. 3 categories. 1 is greater than 5% rated speed, What happens if you go over 5% rated speed? They want you to identify cause, repair, and record event. Record event. All right, so I've got my rated speed was greater than 5%. So let's say I've got 2,400 RPM out of my engine. What is 5% of that?
120.
120. So if I was doing more than 120, that would be 120 RPM higher. So 2520. So if I was actually doing 2520, say 2400, identify cause, repair, and record event. Well, so a lot of engines have a 2700 RPM. So 2700, too much, times 0.05 is 135 RPM. So if you're doing 135 more RPM of that, you would identify cause, repair, and record event. Well, what could be a cause of an overspeed like that? If you have a fixed pitch propeller, how can you overspeed a fixed pitch prop? Nose diving it. All right? Thing about fixed pitch propellers is, and we'll get into propellers, but you have to know that when you look at any aircraft that has a fixed pitch propeller, it says in the type certificate data sheet, we know what type certificate data sheet is? I mean, that is like the, I don't know, what is that? That's the end-all be-all FAA publication about that aircraft, right? That is the #1 publication. It says right in there for any, like a Cessna 150, a 172, right there, static, permissible static RPM. All right, and so let's just take a 150, which had a red line of 25 something. Anybody know? Offhand, I forget what it is. Like we'll just say it's 2,500, just to throw out a number. All right, and so that is the red line RPM. But the static is what it means when your feet are on the brakes, the aircraft is not moving, and you have firewalled it. So max RPM while it's just sitting there. And it'll say something like, not less than 2,100, not more than 2,250. Like, that's a long way from the red line. What is that about? That is a measure of the horsepower output of that engine. So if you have the right propeller on it, it will do that range. And if the engine is tired and not producing its horsepower, it can't get up to that range. But take your feet off the brakes and start to roll. What is the RPM going to do? You'll start climbing. And we're talking way more about that next class about what happens with propellers. But it all has to do with when your feet are on the brakes and the airplane's not moving, there is an angle of attack, which you guys should remember from Phil's class, those of you in that it should be coming about 4 degrees on the prop, but it doesn't. It's coming way behind it. So it's like a flat prop, basically. And so it's really having to slap in the air in a bad way. An inefficient way, that's the word. And so it's held way back. Take your feet off the brakes, you start rolling forward, it changes the angle of attack, and you get higher RPM. All right, so it's very hard to overspeed or have a condition that would cause an overspeed in a fixed pitch prop. The only thing I can think of is diving down to the ground with power on. Now take a constant speed, anything with a constant speed propeller, and you don't have those RPM limits because when your feet are on the brakes and you firewall a constant speed propeller, it goes right to red line. Why? Because the governor is saying, well, you got the prop pushed all the way in. That means you want max RPM. And so the blades just flatten out until it goes to high RPM and it hits the red line. So you don't get that in there. You would cross-check that with manifold pressures and stuff, but it's a little bit different. So what could cause a fixed pitch propeller to go past red line? Quite simply, a misadjusted governor. That's just that simple, right? So if the governor is not adjusted properly, it's going to let the blades go too flat. It's going to let it go past our red line, and there you go. So let's see, where am I here? There's between, remember we have 3 categories. Between 5 to 10%. I have rated speed. What are you going to do? Well, it depends on the type of engine. So it depends on type of engine. Then I have like half a page of notes. Let's see. Let's just say direct drive engines. What's a direct drive engine? No gear reduction. Identify cause. Identify cause. Identify cause. Perform cylinder overspeed inspection. So now it's getting kind of serious in this particular. What we got? Drain oil. Drain oil. Examine all oil filters and screens. Examine all screens and filters and lubrication system for metal contamination. If any unexplained metal contamination is found, identify and correct the cause before returning it into service. Now, I like that. Examine the lube for metal and any unexplained metal accumulation. Well, if I get a whole bunch of metal accumulation, I can explain that by the fact that I oversped the crap out of the engine, so I guess I'm good. I don't think that's what they mean. We have, I think I missed some combined. You have to do a magneto inspection. It's getting expensive. Magneto inspection. 12, 13, 14, 15. And we're going to do a valve train. Valve, T-R-A-I-N, valve train. Inspection. Overspeed inspection per this bulletin. And so you're going to do a lot of work at 5 to 10% of that rated speed. And how long do you get? How much time?
3 seconds.
That's fast. I don't even think you notice it half the time, 3 seconds. It's really got to come down to the fact that you've been doing it for a long time. You looked over, ooh, that's not good. And then if it's greater than 10%, this one is much easier. Complete disassembly.
Isn't that less than?
What? It was 5 to 10. 5 to 10.
I thought the symbol though, isn't it towards the numbers
Greater than 10%.
Oh, well, you said number 1 was greater than 5, but it's the other direction.
Oh. Let me see.
I never could remember this.
Hang on.
Less than 5. Yeah.
Yeah, less than 5. So 1, 2, 3, or 4. Let me help you out. 1, 2, 3, or 4%. You're going to do that. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You're going to do this. 11, 12, 13 above. We'll do this. I don't blame him. I get all confused and say stupid stuff. He's got to check on me. So.
You did say greater than because I wrote.
Yeah, I wrote greater than also.
I had to go back and check.
Complete disassembly, inspection and replacement of counterweight bushings. Interesting, huh? That's all. So just a complete disassembly and make sure you change out the counterweight bushings. Now there's going to be some other stuff in there. Okay, then we have, I think I might have, momentary overspeed.
Would it like stack? So if you're greater than 10%, would you still have to do all the inspections for between 5 and 10 and less than 5?
Yes, thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, you wouldn't get away. Well, you're obviously going to drain the oil. You're doing a complete disassembly at that point. Yeah, I guess you could throw in the magneto inspection as, but that should be caused. All right, then overspeed exceeding 10% of rated power for let's see, No more than 3 seconds, no corrective. So if you're go 10% for less than 3 seconds, yeah, this should not have been there.
So you crank back up.
Yeah, it's just that was just less than 3 seconds. You're fine. No corrective. So momentary. This should have been my original notes are actually kind of nice. Shouldn't have tried to fix them on the fly. So momentary overspeed. If more than 10% rated power for less than 3 seconds, you're fine. Overspeed exceeding 10% rate for more than 3 seconds. I don't even know what the hell.
It's like you said with the E drive.
Yeah. Then if you're
Try and fix it, and then it should go back to the
I know. Yep. So under 3, the key point here is 3 seconds. So if you're overspeed and you're under 3 seconds and it's no more than 10%, you're fine. All right. Let's throw this one in here. We'll make this 13. Overboost. Overboost. You also have when an engine exceeds its rated manifold pressure or so overboost is when engine exceeds its rated manifold pressure. Its rated manifold pressure. That is turbo or supercharged engines. And that's called an overboost. And then there's a bunch of inspections on overboost that we have to deal with, which I'm not going to write them all out. I will just tell you that. Now, the whole thing about manifold pressure, and I don't know, you'll have to tell me, this can get pretty confusing for somebody who, number one, flies a fixed pitch propeller, or you're thinking about cars. So and I know what time it is, but I'm just going to finish this thought and then we'll go on break. So in a aircraft with a constant speed propeller or an aircraft with a turbocharger, you're always going to have a constant speed propeller because you would never waste all of the money on a turbocharging system and then throw in a fixed pitch prop. So you have to remember you don't know this yet, but I'll tell you. A fixed pitch propeller really only is good and has a operates through a wide range, but it's only efficient in a very small window, and that is an exact RPM and an exact forward speed. You change the RPM, change the forward speed, and you change the efficiency of the propeller. So they're not horribly efficient. But a constant speed propeller will change the blade angle to be far more efficient, and they are. So, but when you're operating an aircraft that has a fixed pitch propeller, you deal a lot more with manifold pressure. So, for example, as you take off in say my airplane, as I take off, I have you have 3 knobs. You're going to have the mixture knob, which we're not talking about. I have the propeller knob. All the way forward is high RPM, all the way back is low RPM. Anybody drive a tractor in here? Tractor drivers have a hard time because tractors are backwards. This is fast. This is slow. For us, this is fast. They turn balls to the wall. It's literally an aircraft term. They had little balls on the throttles on the side, and so you put the little balls towards the front. Balls to the wall meant go fast. So forward is fast. So I have the propeller control all the way forward, which means high RPM, go faster. So it's going to allow it to go all the way to red line. And then I put the throttle all the way in, which just like on your car is your right foot, unless you're weird. So right foot all the way forward. So my throttle is all the way open. And if I look over at takeoff, I'm going to be at red line RPM because that's where it's supposed to be. And my manifold pressure is going to go all the way up to almost around 30 inches because what is our atmospheric pressure at sea level? 29.92. So there should be just about an inch lost around there. So we'll call that 30, so right around 29. So you're going to have that manifold pressure. Now, if I just left everything the way it was and started climbing at, 2,000-3,000 feet, I'm going to start noticing my manifold pressure just start to slowly go down. How come it's going to slowly go down?
Pressure?
the atmospheric pressure is dropping, and it's just going to follow it. Well, on my particular airplane, the green arc for manifold pressure is quite a bit down from 28. So I take off, reach 500 feet, safe altitude. First thing I do is pull back my throttle. When I pull back the throttle, what happens to the engine?
It lowers the RPM.
It's going to what?
Lowers the RPM.
Lower the RPM. No. Why does it not? See, this is where it's going to get confusing. My RPM stays right at 2,400. I don't pull it all the way back. If I pull it all the way back, yes, everything's going to go. But I pull it back AFR. So what's going to change?
The prop.
But I don't know that. So what changes on my instrument panel? Nope. RPM stays the same. It's a constant speed. Manifold pressure comes down. So the only thing I change when I pull back my throttle, within reason, is I'll watch the manifold pressure come down. That's it. So what I've done then, I've changed my horsepower output. So I've gone from the 230 horsepower, 100% horsepower, brought it back into 80%, somewhere around that for a climb. Okay, so now I'm climbing. I've got my manifold pressure into the, let's see, this should work. Let's try it. Oh man, no it doesn't. It's going to open up my Google Photos because I got my instrument panel right there. All right, so I'm climbing, and what happens to the manifold? Starts slowly working its way down. What happens to RPM? Boom, it's nailed right there at 2,400. So as I'm climbing, I look over and I'm like, well, now I'm, a couple clicks down from the top of the green. So I add a little bit of manifold pressure, bring my horsepower back up to where it was a second ago. Follow? Okay, so we keep going, and as I keep climbing, I keep following my throttle in. Bring the manifold pressure drops from the top of the green arc. I push the throttle in, it goes back to the top of the green. Keep going. Look, it falls. So every time it falls, I give a little bit more. So eventually I'm going to get up to a certain altitude. I'm going to reach over to go and push my throttle, and it's all the way forward. So here I am. I'm all the way forward on the manifold pressure, all the way forward on the RPM. So but my manifold is now lower than it was a long time ago because I'm way up in the air. RPM is still at 2,400. I decide, hey, you know what? I like this. I'm going to level off. I'm going to level off right here. So I level off. And now if I open up my pilot operating handbook, it's going to tell me for cruise that I want to cruise at 65% horsepower. And it gives me a chart. It says, okay, well, if you're at 10,000 feet, you should be at this and this. Well, let's just say I'm at 5,000 feet. 5,000 feet. Easy numbers. Remember, I want about 22 inches of manifold pressure and about 2,200 RPM. They call it 22 squared. It just happens to be that way. It's just a coincidence. It doesn't mean anything else. So I set my manifold pressure for about 21. I'm going to go low, and I'll pull my prop back. And the RPM's going to RPM's going to now come down. And when that engine slows down, what happens to the manifold? It goes up a little bit. That's why I set it for 21. So it'll creep up a little bit, and then I adjust it. So you have to remember that, we're talking about these things. It's not like a car where you just, how do you overboost a car? Well, you only have one pedal, and it's got the pop-off valves and stuff. But in an aircraft engine, you can do that. Now we can complicate it greatly by starting to add a turbocharger with the wastegate, which we'll talk about next semester. Not right now. So, all right, we're going to take a break, and we are going to